welcome. I'm going to present myself for the next, these 2 minutes while we are waiting for other participants. My name is Mireia Romagosa. I'm Regulatory Affairs Manager at Benantec Consulting. We are a specialist consultancy with over 20 years of experience, established in Barcelona, and we advise companies on the regulatory requirements in food and animal nutrition. I am a pharmacist by background. I am specialized on food safety and food law. I have previous experience on medical nutrition and food supplements, and now at Benantec, I am mainly focused on novel food authorizations, also food enzymes, food additives, feed additives, genetic modified organisms, etc. Today, we are going to talk about novel foods, about the approval and the market access in Europe. Before we start, I would like to share briefly the organization of this webinar. I will speak for about 45 minutes, and afterwards we will have a Q&A session. I expect it can be very interactive, so I encourage you to write your questions in the chat that you will see below. Of course, raise your hand if you have any question important that you want to share before, but I prefer to wait until the end of the presentation to talk about all the questions, mainly because some questions can be solved during the presentation. Also, please note that these slides and the recording will be shared with you after the webinar, hopefully before the end of Monday. And in case we don't have enough time to answer all your questions, we will answer them in the same email. So today we are going to talk about the regulatory framework in Europe, specifically for novel foods. We are going to see the definition of novel foods, the categories, and also traditional foods, the approval overview of these authorizations. Also, which tools do you have to or you can rely to see if your ingredient is novel or not. Also, which is the safety assessment and the risk evaluation of with EFSA. Briefly, we will see how these novel food should be labeled and the market access. And in the last part of the presentation, we will share some recent submitted applications that we have now and some learnings that we have, and also insights from EFSA Opinions, positive and negative. And we will finish with some tips to know how to write a good quality dossier and some take-home messages. So in Europe, we have a general regulation. It's 178 of 2002, which lays down the general principles and the requirements of food law. When you want to introduce a new ingredient to the market, it can be, okay, I see, yes, Charlotte. I see a raised hand. Okay, I cannot hear you. Okay, perhaps it was a mistake. Okay, I'll continue. So, yeah, we when we have a new ingredient, it can be split with this diagram. So new ingredients that are added to food with a nutritional purpose or physiological benefits, we should follow this route. And the first thing we should assess is about their novelty or they are not novel before we place them on the market. And it can be in the form of a conventional food, of a food supplement, food for special groups, for example, infant formulas, FSMPs, food for special medical purposes. In the novel food regulation, they are excluded non-nutritional ingredients, for example, food additives, flavorings, or food enzymes. They have their separate regulation and they require a separate authorization, as well as genetic modified organisms, which they require a separate a separate authorization. So novel foods are regulated by this regulation 2015-2283, and they define novel food as any food that was not consumed for human consumption to a significant degree within the Union before the 15th of May of 1997. This is irrespective of the date of the accession of the member state that we can claim a significant degree of consumption. And it should fall under one of these 10 categories. For example, we have food with new or modified structures. Also food consisting of, isolated from, or produced from microorganism, fungi, or algae. Also, yes, Yasmin? I see you raise your hand. I cannot see any message on the chat. Oops, sorry. Okay, I'll continue. If you have a question, I can check the chat. Okay, so also it can be materials of mineral origin, plants or their parts, and we have some exclusion. For example, foods that are done by traditional propagating practices. For example, of a close from the same species or another variety, it can be excluded. Or for example, if even if they are not used by traditional propagating practices, but have the same structure or the same chemical composition, or they don't have undesirable substances, then it can be considered also non-novel. Also, we can find animals or their parts, and they are also excluded animals that have been obtained by traditional breeding practices with a safe history of safe use of the animal, cell culture or tissue culture, which are derived from animals, plants, microorganisms, fungi, or algae. Food from resulting of a new production process is also included as in the novel food regulation. And this is specifically relevant because, for example, companies sometimes, to improve their processes and enhance, for example, stability of their products, etc., usually they make some slight changes, and they need to assess first the regulatory consideration if this can be a novel food or not. So if the change is significant and can affect their safety, of course, they need to pursue a novel food authorization. Also, engineered nanomaterials are included in the novel food regulation, vitamins, mineral, and other substances. And lastly, food that have been exclusively used in food supplement, but now you want to use it in food, also they require, before the 15th of May of 1997, they require novel food authorization. There is a specific category, which is traditional foods, but basically it's food from a third country outside the European community that is derived from primary production and has a history of safe use in another country. The requirements are that it should have a continued use for at least 25 years in the customary diet of a significant number of people of this country. It's important that it has a significant number and it's not from one small village with a low amount of people consuming it. This procedure, it's also an authorization, and it's regulated by another regulation and has a simplified authorization procedure. You should know that there are only 4 categories that are allowed to have this kind of considerations. But you should know, or you should consider first, if your product will really follow under a primary production consideration, according to the definition of Regulation 178 of 2002, which basically established that primary production is the production, the rearing, or growing of primary products, including harvesting, milking, and farmed animal production prior to slaughter. It also includes hunting and fishing and harvesting of wild products. So we should assure if, for example, microorganisms or cell culture can follow this definition. For your information, it was in 2020 at Penantech. We also we did a webinar about traditional foods. I include here the link, and I think it's a very interesting webinar. We are not going to go more in deep with this category, so I encourage to see this webinar if you have interest. So how can we assess if our ingredient is novel or not novel? We can do different things. So first of this, okay, very good. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to continue from here. Yes, regarding to advise if your ingredient is novel or not novel, the food business operators, according to the Novel Food Regulation, have the responsibility to determine whether a food is novel or not novel. The first thing that you can do is to check the novel food catalog. This is a database that it has been set up by the European Commission, and it contains a non-exclusive list of foods and their status, whether they are novel or not. It's a very interesting start to advise with your product. A second thing that it's very important to do is to check relevant available evidence of the history of safe use, because with that you can see if you can have significant any proof of significant consumption before the 1997. Lastly, if you are still unsure and you don't have any way of seeing, or you want a formal confirmation from the European Commission before you start preparing the dossier, you can do a novel food consultation to a member state. So this follows this regulation 2018-456, and you can consult to a member state whether your product is novel or not. Basically, this consultation will consist of a mini dossier in which the applicant have to provide information about the manufacturing process, the history of safe use, and the specification. Usually, the member state, once they receive this dossier, would take around 4 to 8 months after validation, and they will inform you the classification of your product. You have here a link where you can check all the novel food official consultations, and this is a very good source as well to see, for example, if you have one novel food in a specific category, you can check the novel food considerations here, and it's very useful. Okay, so now I'm going to share with you a poll. So let's see if this works. You should see a poll now, and basically I would like you to answer which do you think that from these 4 ingredients is novel. Do you see properly the poll? Yes, I see that people are answering. So basically you have 1, sodium reduced salt. 2, dihydrotate mycelium powder from Pleurotus eringi, Pleurotus ostreatus, and Polyporus umbellatus. The third one, it's sodium-enriched mushrooms and vitamin B12 enriched mushrooms from Agaricus bisporus. And lastly, whey treated with UV radiation. Okay, let's wait just a few seconds. I see that everybody is answering. Okay, we have more than 50%. I'll leave you 5 more seconds. Okay, this is interesting to see. Okay, I'll pay a little bit more. Okay, I'm going to stop now. We have 75% of the people already answered, and I'm going to show now the results. So basically, yeah, so more or less 40% thinks it's the second one, and the other 40% it's the third one. So the results are the second one, mycelium product. So I'm going to go through each ingredient because I want to share a bit what did the European Commission, well, the member state considered for each one. And for example, the first one, we are very proud of this one. This was a consultation to the Belgian authorities. This was that was done by Penantech, and this was last month that we got this confirmation. Is there any, sorry, I see a comment from Shahul. Is there any complete database for checking ingredient novel food status? No. No, we have an unofficial non-exhaustive list, and we have this database. So no, we don't have a complete list, unfortunately. So for example, this sodium reduced salt it's extracted from a salt lake in Chile. And basically, at the beginning, the Belgian authorities considered that because of the origin and perhaps the composition, they were not very sure that this could be considered non-novel. However, we found a regulation from Austria, national level, that they confirmed the use of sodium-reduced salts before 1997. So by the principle of mutual recognition, we received a positive confirmation from the Belgian authorities. Thanks to that, a formal consultation was not required in the end because we approached them unofficially. The second, the one that is novel, it's an interesting case because this was a consultation to the Spanish Food Safety and Nutrition Authority. And basically, the applicant provided significant consumption data in the European Union prior to 1997 of the free mycelium. However, the agency considered since this consumption was only concerning the reproductive part, they could not establish an equivalence or a relationship with this data because the mycelium is the vegetative part. So be careful with these parts, and we should clarify and characterize super well our novel food, because in this case we could not use the data. Well, the applicant could not use the data, and they consider it novel. Regarding the third one, the selenium-enriched mushrooms and the vitamin B12-enriched mushrooms, this is a very interesting case because it was in 2019, before Brexit, that UK, the agency concluded that this was novel. However, after further, there was a second decision in June of 2022 where they say that they reversed their opinion, and they say that there were no novel. So there is a novel food official consultation to Ireland where they summarize the reasons of this consideration. And basically what they say is that since there was for selenium, these are mushrooms that have a standardized amount of selenium and vitamin B12. And it's in their production process that they have addition of sodium selenite, the source of selenite, selenium, and cyanocobalamin, which is a source of vitamin B12, in the compost via the watering regime. And basically what they concluded is that there were long-standing practices of nutritional supplementing crops before 1984 in Finland. Also, they were comparing the nutritional composition of mushrooms that were already on the market before 1997 and mushrooms that and these mushrooms, and they see that the composition of these nutrients were the same. Therefore, this was one of the exceptions that we were saying before. When you have no chemical, like no change on the amount, then you can consider also, they consider it for this reason that they were not novel. And lastly, we have the weight treated with UV radiation, and this is also an interesting case because there are other novel foods with UV radiation, for example, bread or even milk. But in this case, with whey, it was the Italian authorities that consider that they were not novel because they compared the composition with the non-radiated way, and they see that there were no chemical changes. However, they said that the UV treatment radiation, it's regulated by a national level. So if you want to produce it in other countries, despite they consider that it's not novel, you should have authorization of this type of processing. Okay, so now that we have clear, or we know if how to determine if an ingredient is novel or not novel, then we should focus on the safety and to demonstrate, well, in the assessment, to demonstrate with scientific evidence that our novel food does not pose any risk to human health under the proposed conditions of use. We should know which is the novel food regulation applicable, and also we should start preparing all the safety data for drafting the dossier. As we said, we have two different applications: a novel food and a traditional food. So novel foods in Europe require a pre-marketing safety assessment, which is carried out by EFSA, the European Food Safety Authority. However, it's the European Commission who grants the authorization of the novel foods. Once they receive the positive opinion from EFSA, they confirm it, the authorization, by including the novel food in the European Union list. As we said, we have two different procedures, novel foods or traditional novel foods. These kind of authorizations are generic, so they are not exclusive for one applicant. This means that, for example, if you register one product and we get a positive opinion and is included in the union list, another applicant that complies with the same specifications and the labeling requirements, they can commercialize it as well. However, we see that some authorizations, for example, with microorganisms, they are strain specific. This means that, for example, if a company developed their own strain and they have the proprietary data, somehow it can be kind of exclusive. Also, novel food permits a 5-year protection of proprietary data. And this is newly developed scientific evidence, for example, related with the manufacturing process, that supports the safety of the application. And during 5 years, you have the protection, and any other applicant can use it. Yes. I think that you see it better now. Okay, thank you for letting me know, Charlotte. Okay. Regarding, well, in March of 2021, there was a new regulation, the transparency regulation that you probably will have heard. And basically, what they wanted to do is to increase the transparency about the risk assessment in the food chain. This new regulation was a significant change for all the process of regulation of all types of food. So it amended a lot of regulations, including the one from novel food. One of the new things that involved this change was that now applicants could ask pre-submission advice. Unfortunately, you cannot request study design questions in this assessment. You are allowed to have 2 consultations with multiple questions. However, you cannot repeat one question in both the request. Also, they centralized the submission through one new platform for all, not just novel food, but also for other categories, and it's the submission food chain platform. And one of the main or relevant changes was that now all the studies have to be notified before the study starts. If they are not properly notified, then you will have delays, well, penalties of 6 months of delay of revision of your dossier. So it's important in order that you don't want to waste time to notify them properly. this past August, we had very good news because EFSA, after 2 years of experience with the transparency regulation, they shared some clarification about the identity and the compositional analysis were accepted from notifying the studies. These are, for example, the whole genome sequencing, purities, physicochemical parameters in 5 batches, the batch-to-batch data. However, we still have other studies that require notification, which are stability, absence of viable cells, or recombinant DNA of the production. Also genotoxicity, all the toxicity data, etc. So this is how it looks, the novel food approval overview. You will see that so the deadlines the deadlines are a bit different compared novel food with traditional food. We already said that traditional foods are a bit more simplified. So with novel food application, it takes at least 1.5 years. Realistically, it takes up to 3.5 years. It depends on EFSA request and also if the client provides all the new data. For traditional foods, it takes around 1 year, and it takes up to 2 years. So the scheme is as follows. So the first and the foremost, you should confirm that you have cleared the specifications of your product and you have very well defined the manufacturing process. Otherwise, it's difficult to assess the safety. Afterwards, the applicant should request a pre-application ID in order that they can have a new application. Optionally, they can request pre-submission advice through another platform. It's the EFSA Connect. Then once we start planning the studies, you should notify them, as we said. We will have after that, we will start preparing the dossier, conducting the studies, etc. And once we have it ready, we should submit it through the submission food chain platform. It's going to, when we have ready the dossier, we will submit it to the European Commission, which they have 1 month to assess the validity of the completeness of this application. Then the Commission will decide whether they want EFSA to do, if they require a scientific opinion from them, which has happened in all cases until now. EFSA, when EFSA receives this dossier, it will take approximately 1 month. So they will assess on the suitability check that you have provided all the relevant data and the confidentiality assessment. This is very important because during this period, they will assess on confidentiality, and you will, when you write the dossier, you will provide for every piece of information 2 documents. One is the confidential version and the other is the non-confidential version. So the non-confidential version, which means it's all the reports, but with redacted or blackened the information. And once they confirm the decision of confidentiality, they will release your dossier to the public. So all the information that has not been redacted, it will be available now. So it's very important that you assess very well and to include as much as information possible regarding confidentiality. Also, EFSA might disagree on information about confidentiality, so be aware that you should justify it properly. Then once EFSA, after advising on the confidentiality, will start the safety assessment, and this can take at least 9 months. During this period, EFSA, these 9 months are theoretically, and it may take longer because usually EFSA requests additional information to the applicant. And at this point, when they request it, the clock stops and the assessment is put on hold until the applicant provides all the requested data and the evaluation continues. Once they finish with the risk assessment and they receive all the information that they need from the applicant, they will share their opinion to the European Commission. Of course, if there is a negative opinion, you will not have an approval. And it's the Standing Committee of Plants, Animals, Food and Feed who will decide if they approve or not the novel food. Usually, EFSA opinion is it goes in line with the approval. We'll see that there can be exceptions, but usually they agree on the outcome. After that, once the SCOPA approves it, and it can take around 7 months to receive an approval, they will authorize the substance and, well, the novel food, and they will publish it in the union list. Okay, so regarding the data that we need for the dossier, we must follow, apart from following the regulation, we need to follow EFSA guidances, which will help a lot with the preparation of the dossiers. Even they are guidances, they are kind of compulsory. Otherwise, we won't have a positive opinion, or it will be very difficult. For novel foods, we mainly have 2 guidelines, the administrative one and the one with the general requirements. As you can see here, we have 3 parts. This is exactly the same structure as the submission for change platform. We have an administrative part, public summary, and the technical dossier. So basically, the technical dossier will include the identity of the novel food, the production process, which should be in enough detail to assess the safety of the substance, compositional data and stability. This should be, you should use 5 batches to confirm this information. Also specifications of all the parameters that you include. And then you have the history of safe use, the proposed use and exposure calculations, the kinetics of the substance, nutritional information, the toxicological data, allergenicity assessment, and conclusions. So it's quite a lot. Then we have other guidance. This is how it looks, the submission for chain platform. Well, it's exactly as I said, it has the same structure, and you will include all the data here. So as I was saying, we have other relevant guidance that are not specific of novel food, but we should follow because it might be relevant for our product. For example, regarding novel food microorganisms, you might find, well, you should follow this guidance from 2018 regarding the guidance on the characterization of microorganisms. This guidance now it's going to be updated, so we expect in November a public consultation of a new version, and probably next year this will be adopted. So we'll wait for this information. Here we have all the requirements on how to characterize a microorganism, how to identify it, all the genes of concern, antimicrobial resistant genes, all the safety assessment. Also, we have another statement from EFSA from 2021 regarding the requirements for the whole genome sequencing. The whole genome sequence, it's analysis that help us to identify properly a microorganism, but also to identify any potential gene of concern or antimicrobial resistant genes. So it's compulsory for microorganisms. And now we have there was a release in May of 2023, a new draft statement about how to interpret the QPS qualification on acquired antimicrobial resistant genes. This draft intends to clarify definitions of intrinsic and acquired antimicrobial genes and provides some general principles on the risk assessment of these genes. And we expect next month to have the final version. Of course, this will be, after the publication, it's going to be a compulsory to comply with it. So there were a few comments that EFSA still needs to address because there will be significant changes, and we'll see how it evolves. We were mentioning QPS. So when we have a microorganism, we should assess if this is a QPS. QPS means Qualified Presumption of Safety. It's a safety assessment that was introduced in 2007 by EFSA. And this is a concept for microorganisms that have a pre-assessment about their safety and covers the safety for humans, animals, and the environment. This is at species level, not strain. And it says, it informs about history of safe use of the substance. Of course, as we said, this is for the species level. So we should identify unambiguously our strain. And we can only do it with the whole genome sequencing that is requested by EFSA. The QPS strain is not free to the need of exhaustive safety assessment. So we need to comply with this guidance. So we need the whole genome sequencing. We need to identify any antimicrobial resistant genes, virulence genes, etc. So we still need a few requirements. Also, it's important to know that even if our strain can be considered as QPS, it should follow the evaluation of like the legal framework that it applies. So, for example, we can have a strain that have a history of safe use. However, for a specific production of one specific food. However, if you are trying to register another type of food that uses this microorganism, this is subject to a novel food regulation. So it's not a grant of non-novelty. There are other guidances. Yes. Yeah, here. Okay, we are going to answer all the questions later because I get distracted, but we are going to go back with your questions. So we have specific requirements. For example, which have their specific guidance, and these are transversal within all the categories, not just for novel foods. So, for example, regarding toxicological studies, we have a general EFSA guidance, which is for they establish that the toxicity studies of a substance should have a tiered approach, which is like a free type consideration. So we will start with tier 1, which require a minimum set of information. For example, they will require genotoxicity testing, Ames test or micronucleus test, advice about the absorption of the substance, and the 90-day subchronic rat study. If one of these studies is positive, we should follow the tier, but only of this positive study. For example, if the 90-day rat studies has a positive, then we should move to the next studies. But for example, genotoxicity, if it's okay, we have enough. Then we have the nanomaterial assessment, which is very important to assess from the beginning. We have 2 guidances. The first one is compulsory for all applications regarding small particles. And the second one is related to nanomaterials. So we will have small fractions of nano. We should assess if our product has a small fractions of nanoparticles. It's important to know it from the beginning because, for example, in the case we are subject to nanomaterials, there are, for example, some toxicity studies that are not useful for this assessment. For example, the Ames test, and then we should select another type of toxicity study. Also, we have some tools for the dietary exposure that will help us to calculate the estimated exposure to the novel food, and it's a friendly use tool that it's a very friendly tool. Regarding allergenicity, we also have to assess the protein content of our substance, and to see if there is a concern on allergenicity, and also we can, for example, compare this homology sequence with known allergens and assess the potential allergenicity of our substance. Then for botanicals as well, we have some guidances, and since last year, We have a new regulation, for example, of one specific polyphenol of green tea extract. And it was, well, usually we don't have regulations of specific substances, so we need to pay attention if there are specific regulations of substances that we intend to register. Also, the literature search that will help us to see the history of safe use and the safety of the substance has to be according to EFSA guidances. So regarding the market access and the labeling, as we said, once the novel food is approved, there is a union list of authorized novel foods. And this union list is constantly updated. So I think it's every 2 months that there is an update approximately. The last one is from October of 2023. And it's very important that you check the consolidated version with the latest inclusions. An authorization of a novel food includes which food category applies. So, for example, if you intend to register, if you intend to market a new category that was not included in the union list, you should send another dossier with this new use. Of course, it will be simplified, but you need to register this new use. You will have maximum levels and labeling requirements. Also, you have the specifications that you must follow during the commercialization of this product. So regarding recently submitted dossiers that we have worked at Penn and Tech, we received some information that we have learned from our clock stops, well, our applicants' clock stop. And for example, regarding the genotoxicity, it was a very interesting request from EFSA. So this was, we received it for 2 microorganisms, and we believe that this is going to be something that the EFSA will include it in the guidance. So for genotoxicity studies, EFSA requires to test the substance as it intended to be marketed. However, for 2 dossiers, we received a request to repeat genotoxicity test, both EMS test and in vitro micronucleus test, using the lysate of the microorganism and the supernatant. These were very, very bad news, because this means that these are 4 new studies with the cost, because they have a high cost. And apparently it seems that it's going to be a new practice or a new request by EFSA. So we are waiting that they include it in the novel food guidance or somewhere, because at the moment there is no way to advise this information. Then regarding the proposed use levels and anticipated intake, it's important to note that we receive also comments that the exposure calculation should also contain undesirable substance or impurities. So we need to assess that as well. Regarding compositional data, we have seen recently in the clock stops that they are more and more demanding regarding the presence of impurities, for example, aluminum, chromium, or arsenic, or other components, but also nutrients. So, for example, if you have when you have your data of the batch-to-batch data, and you see that you have one value that is very variable between the 5 batches, we recommend that you assess first the origin of this source. It comes from the water, from one ingredient from natural origin, or whatever, and to try to provide a specification or a justification of this presence, because EFSA will request information about that. Also, note that the microbial parameters, unfortunately, there are only a few that are compulsory, however, that are established in the guidance. However, EFSA usually request additional microbial parameters to analyze. So our recommendation is that you should go further, and you should evaluate the nature of your product and consider which microorganism might affect, because EFSA will probably request it. Regarding nutritional information, we have received an interesting request. So this product has a high amount of fiber, and EFSA requests to provide data on the quality and the digestibility of the proteins. Also, regarding stability, so the shelf life is not legally binding. However, it's a request. It's requested by EFSA, and it's important that you use the final product. So, for example, if you use for stability a concentrated form, it won't be accepted. Also, it's very important that the results that you receive during all the times that you are testing are all within the specification until the end of the shelf life. Also, if, for example, you use this novel food as an ingredient to be added to other ingredients, it's important that you also assure the stability, or you test the stability of the novel food in that food matrices. They will request that. So considering this, this is a brief of the main things that we find, and our main recommendation is, of course, to follow the current EFSA guidances, and also check the latest EFSA opinion that you will find in the Open EFSA. Also, it's very difficult to establish a list of the parameters that will be requested by EFSA. It's difficult to advise all these parameters. However, because this is a case-by-case evaluation, so we encourage the applicants, because you are the experts on your product, so you know more about safety than anybody else. So it's important that you evaluate properly your product, and you assess which are the parameters that might be relevant. Regarding other EFSA opinions that we have seen until now, some interesting insights from these opinions. For example, with negative opinions, we have seen that, for example, a negative opinion was considered because the manganese in this product, Wolffia globosa, was too high. So they compared the amounts. I believe it was in other natural products. I don't know, some nuts, and it was around 6, and in this product it was like around 150 milligrams. So they request to, well, they did not accept it, so they issued a negative opinion for this. So pay attention to all the nutritional composition, and to advise if you have any ingredient that has too much, it's too high, and can have a safety concern. Then we have this second case. This case, of course, so they provide human studies, and in that human studies, they were severe adverse events, cerebral hemorrhage and epilepsy. So, of course, EFSA, even if it was in a few patients, they confirmed they don't want to continue with this. Well, they said that they could not claim safety. Regarding positive opinions, when you got a positive opinion, this does not mean that you get what you ask. For example, with this extract, they accepted lower doses than the ones proposed by the applicants. Of course, they respect the margin of safety, so it's a 200-fold margin. So the applicant asked for 350 milligrams, and considering this margin of safety, they received only 35 milligrams per day of a maximum daily amount. So it's important that you apply correctly this kind of margin of safety. This will depend on the NOAEL that we receive, the non-observed adverse events level, from the toxicity studies, and the exposure calculation. So make sure that the design is correct as well, and you choose the appropriate dosage. There are exceptions of this margin of safety. So, for example, with human milk oligosaccharides in infant formula, EFSA accepted to have lower margins of safety. Also, there are some products that you can find that toxicity studies are not always asked. This will depend on the nature of the novel food and also the available literature. So we encourage you to make sure that all the information available you have, because you can save a lot of money, basically. And also, This is a very, very interesting case. So these applicants of a head-kill Mycobacterium cepense manresensis receive a positive opinion. However, they never receive an approval from the European Commission, and this was a bit weird. We don't know what happened. Probably there were some interest behind, but even they got a positive opinion, there was not a subsequent approval. So which are our recommendations to assure a good quality dossier? So first of all, consider not just the novel food guidances, but also other EFSA guidances. For example, the ones that we said of toxicity, nanoparticles, microorganisms. Provide always the source of the data that you provide or the search strategy that you did for the literature search, because EFSA will request it. Provide complete dossiers with all the relevant studies that might be required in the guidance. Also, it's very important to address data that you find that it's not favorable for your dossier or may raise uncertainties. You should consider in your dossier and address it and discuss it properly and why you still consider that your substance is safe. Lastly, EFSA encourage applicants to provide strong arguments in the cases that they don't conduct specific studies or they provide justifications for deviations of or omissions from guidances. So we encourage you to, first of all, to know very well your product and the constituents to determine if it's not novel or not novel. You always have the possibility of a public consultation in case of doubt before you submit a new dossier. Any modification on the production process must be considered if it can follow within the novel food application. So the timelines are very variable, and we of course recommend a good quality dossier because then you will have less extensions of the evaluation. Also, bear in mind that if these evaluations take a lot of time, you are in danger that every now and then you have new EFSA guidances, so new requirements. So this is not, this will be information that you have not taken into account at the beginning, but during the process you will be requested. Transparency regulation has clearly changed the rules, so assure that you notify the studies and all the confidential data is properly redacted. And also keep track of EFSA guidance updates, as we were saying. This sometimes it's not easy, but you can submit to the newsletter from EFSA and they will circulate every now and then all the updates. Also statements and opinions of other novel foods. And lastly, EFSA, what they want to see is safety. So try to see that your scientific data is robust and you demonstrate that your product is safe. Well, thank you very much for your attention. Again,